Group behavior may be one of the things that characterizes humans uniquely compared to other species. That's not to say that other species don't have groups, but they're typically much smaller and comprised of extended kin and close knit groups of friends. This was true of humans for the better part of 200,000 years up until the advent of agriculture, at which point human groups exploded in size to include the nation states we see today, with hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people living as part of a collective tribe. So, the study of social groups, both large and small, is very important for psychologists. Part of the reason that groups are important to us is because we're motivated to belong to them. Healthy humans have a fundamental need to belong or to affiliate with others in social groups. We do this all the time, ranging from groups of friends to classmates, work colleagues, teammates, or club members. We belong to groups all the time, and for the most part, we're driven to do this because it satisfies a fundamental urge we have to affiliate with others. In part, the need to belong stems from a desire to avoid being ostracized. Your textbook describes one of the ways in which social groups are psychologically significant because living in groups gives us an evolutionary advantage. We can do a lot more to support each other's welfare in the context of groups and accomplish a lot more than we would individually. We come from a long evolutionary lineage of social organisms who understood that to be socially isolated often led to severe illness and death. Our fear of ostracism is a strong motivating force and is one of the reasons why it feels so crappy when we're made to feel excluded from a social group. Another reason why groups are psychologically significant is because when we affiliate with others, this gives us an opportunity to gain information about ourselves. This can happen through a process of social comparison, where people join with others to evaluate themselves in terms of their tendencies, attitudes, and worth. Sometimes people will deliberately seek out others who were less fortunate to compare themselves to in an effort to make themselves feel better. This is a process of downward social comparison. At this point, I invite you to pause the video and answer the question, who am I? In answering this question about yourselves, you are likely to be drawing on your membership in social groups and group based identities. People often base their sense of self worth on various qualities or attributes that their groups have. Social identity theory is a theoretical analysis of group processes and intergroup relations that assumes groups influence their members' self concepts and self esteem, particularly when individuals categorize themselves as group members and identify with the group. In this sense, someone's self esteem is not just an individualist construct based on personal feelings of self worth, but also a collective self esteem based on the group status and welfare. The sociometer model theorizes that self esteem functions as a psychological gauge by which we monitor our value in the eyes of other people. This means that self esteem fluctuates based on the degree of inclusion and exclusion in social groups. Thus, self esteem is defined by how we connect to others in social groups and the status of those groups. Social facilitation is part of the way that groups change our motivation and performance. Basically, social facilitation is an enhancement feature of belonging in a group or just doing something in the presence of other people. So, for example, early studies in social psychology showed that people who were reeling in a fishing line did so faster when other people were around compared to when they were alone. But whether social facilitation happens depends on the type of task. Specifically, it depends on whether the task is relatively straightforward, simple, and easy, and whether people feel self efficacious. That is, whether they feel confident that they can do the task well. When a task is difficult or strenuous or complex, or when people have a low degree of self confidence, then we see that social facilitation does not happen. And in fact, we see the opposite, a phenomenon known as social inhibition. While groups tend to outperform individuals, they also tend to be underachieving. People need to work in a collective effort, though this doesn't always occur. Social loafing is the reduction of individual effort exerted when people work in groups compared to when they work alone. The opposite of social loafing is teamwork, the process by which members of the team combine their knowledge, skills, abilities, and other resources through coordinated actions to produce an outcome is called teamwork. There are two key ingredients to effective teamwork: a shared mental representation of the task and group unity. Teams improve their performance over time as they develop a shared understanding of the team and the tasks that they are attempting to do. This is known as the shared mental model, which includes knowledge, expectations, and other cognitive representations that members of a group have in common pertaining to the task. Group cohesion is a feeling of solidarity or unity of a group resulting from the development of strong mutual interpersonal bonds among members, such as shared commitment to group goals and values. Cohesion is a variable that improves teamwork. Group cohesion is the integrity, solidarity, social integration, or unity of a group. For example, how much people like each other and their interest in common goals will positively impact their level of cohesion. One theory of group development is based on a five-stage model. In the forming phase, members become oriented toward one another. They reveal information about themselves in polite but tentative interactions. They explore the purposes of the group and gather information about each other's interests, skills, and personal tendencies. In the storming phase, members find themselves in conflict, and some solution is sought to improve the group environment. Disagreements about procedures and purposes surface, so criticism and conflict increase. Much of the conflict stems from challenges between members who are seeking to increase their status and control in the group. The norming phase involves standards for behavior and roles developing that regulate behavior. Once the group agrees on its goals, procedures, and leadership, norms, roles, and social relationships develop that increase the group's stability and cohesiveness. In the performing phase, the group has reached a point where it can work as a unit to achieve desired goals. The group focuses its energies and attention on its goals, displaying higher rates of task orientation, decision-making, and problem-solving. And then finally, in the adjourning phase, the group disbands. The group prepares to disband by completing its tasks, reduces levels of dependency among members, and deals with unresolved issues. But as people's behavior can change while operating within a group, this can have positive and negative consequences. One such consequence is polarization, which we commonly hear about nowadays in America with respect to politics. Political polarization is a great example of how group polarization works in general. Basically, when people become segregated into different groups which have different ideas or beliefs, then those groups become even more extreme in their thinking. That is, while the average liberal or conservative individual might be moderate in their thinking, if they're surrounded mainly or solely with others who think like they do, then their opinions become more and more extreme. Decision making also becomes more extreme in terms of it being riskier and less well informed. Groups benefit from viewpoint diversity. One of the problems with group polarization is that people spend too much time focused on what they already know and believe. This is referred to as the common knowledge effect. It doesn't help a group to keep harping on the ideas they already think are true or correct. Groups would benefit more by incorporating fresh eyes to speak up about what they may not be seeing and diverse perspectives to increase the amount of information at their disposal. The consequences of group polarization and lack of viewpoint diversity is something that psychologists call groupthink, a term coined by researcher Irving Janis. Groupthink is a mode of thinking that people engage in when they are deeply involved in a cohesive in-group, when the members' strivings for unanimity override their motivation to realistically appraise alternative courses of action. Groupthink can have devastating and disastrous consequences. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster is commonly cited as an example of groupthink. Groupthink typically happens when four factors are present. One is conformity pressure. This is described in your textbook as cohesiveness, but really this is a process by which people engage in self-censorship. They want to speak up to challenge an idea, but feel pressure to keep silent. Groupthink really only occurs in cohesive groups. Such groups have many advantages over groups that lack unity. When cohesiveness intensifies, members become more likely to accept the goals, decisions, and norms of the group without reservation. Conformity pressures also rise as members become reluctant to say or do anything that goes against the grain of the group, and the number of internal disagreements necessary for good decision-making decreases. The second factor is isolation. This is when a group is segregated from outsiders. This contributes to a sense that the group is somehow immune from outside criticism. Groupthink groups too often work behind closed doors, keeping out of the limelight. They isolate themselves from outsiders and refuse to modify their beliefs to bring them into line with society's beliefs. The third factor is biased leadership. This is when a leader exerts too much authority over group members, which can further increase conformity and lead to poor critical thinking. In groupthink, the leader determines the agenda for each meeting, sets limits on discussion, and even decides who can speak. The fourth factor is decisional stress. Groupthink becomes more likely when the group is under pressure to generate outcomes and decisions quickly, which can further inhibit necessary dissent, discussion, and critical thinking. Overall, while it's clear that group living provides distinct advantages in societies all over the world, we must be very careful and vigilant not to fall prey to toxic group psychology. You can be on the lookout for this yourself. A clear sign that groupthink is happening is when people feel intense social pressure to not voice their opinions because of fear that they will be shunned or ostracized from their social group. This is already happening now in universities all across the country. Recent surveys have shown that a majority of college students agree that the climate on their campus prevents students from saying things they believe, and this number has increased in recent years. University culture should be the exact opposite of this. College campuses should be the place where people feel liberated to say and what they think and feel. At Johns Hopkins, we rank very poorly on measures of free speech climate. These results are based on survey findings from an organization called FIRE, in which students are asked how they feel about expressing their viewpoints openly. Students answered a series of 31 questions about their experiences and attitudes about free speech and expression on their college campuses. They were also asked how often they felt they could not express their opinion openly because of how other students, faculty, or the administration would respond. Opinions ranged from never to very often. If they were worried about damaging their reputation because of someone misunderstanding something they have said or done, again, options range from worried a lot to not at all. JHU ranks at number 193, which is well behind many of our peer institutions, including my doctoral alma mater, Stony Brook, and the University of Maryland, which is where I had my first faculty job. If you agree that this is a problem, I encourage you to get involved on your campus to improve the campus climate. You can also support organizations like FIRE or Heterodox Academy, which I'm a member of, that is dedicated to viewpoint diversity. Their slogan is, "Great minds don't always think alike."